110% sure that this decision might not stand in the court for sure.
Right, that is something that I started this conversation with, isn't it, Dr. Srinath Sridharan? Let me bring that back to you, and I want to get Bhanik Moitra's view on that as well. The fact that this is an announcement, it's an executive order signed by the US. It's yet to become a law.
Yeah, that's true. The reality, Krishna, I mean, even if it gets overturned in the court of law, and I don't think President Trump is going to take a snub from the court very nicely, and it's going to come back in some form or the other. So I think the safer bet that the American tech companies have done is to call back their employees and all that. Yes, it creates a lot of panic. But the reality is, if I were an Indian tech company serving American clients, the reality is I would do whatever it takes to, one, retain my people because it's a precious commodity, and two, to retain my account with the American firm. So I think it is going to be end of the day economics. So short-term pain, I think people will still bear as long as they can get moving ahead.
Okay, Bhanik, your thoughts?
So listen, the president and his cabinet have shown over the past year that they do not listen to court injunctions or court stays, right? I do expect this to get enforced on the date, which is September 21st. You will see significant more scrutiny at the border for people entering the country. Even though if it gets stayed by a federal court, it will get escalated to the US Supreme Court. Over the last 6-7 months, the US Supreme Court has sided with the Trump administration 100% of the time. If you look at the proclamation very carefully, it suggests that the validity of this proclamation is 1 year, which does not suggest that it needs congressional ratification unless a new proclamation is issued again for another year. So again, let's be clear, there may be some injunctions, but the enforcement will start day after tomorrow. And I think any judicial relief which people are hoping and praying for is unlikely to come, given that most of these cases ultimately end up in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, which now the Republicans have a 6-3 majority. Out of 9 members, they have 6. Very high unlikelihood of the Supreme Court to side with any of the petitioners to overturn this. So I think we should realize that this is the new normal, right? And to be absolutely honest, the $100,000 fee does not apply to new H-1B applicants, but Howard Lutnick made it very clear in yesterday's press conference that it applies to renewals as well. So anyone who's in the US today on any kind of an H-1B, unless they have an EB-2 processed under national interest waiver, where you get a national interest waiver exemption, every single of these person, which may be millions of people in the US, whenever their H-1B comes up for approval or renewal, I think the company has to pay the extended $5,000 and the $100,000, and the judicial relief for courts, if any, will be temporary, and it's quite likely to continue for the next 1 year. And I don't think tech companies are going to bet on them winning against the Trump administration. So structurally, a lot of these jobs will get offshored in the next 1 or 2 years, because uncertainty is something which businesses don't like.
Clearly, and that's the reason why, the biggest of them all, from everybody from Microsoft to Amazon, have already called back all their H-1B visa workers immediately to join within 24 hours back in office. Dr. Jayant Dasgupta, that means, with the chances of it finding any kind of judicial relief in the US unlikely, bleak, which means that there'll have to be, at least for the immediate near term, there'll be workarounds like the ones that he was talking about, Shripal Jain was talking about, go to Canada, go to somewhere else, and then come back to the US. There will be workarounds that needs to be established, at least for the immediate future.
I think that avenue has also been plugged, if I am not wrong, because if you want to apply for a US visa, you have to go back to your own country to do it. And you can't go to Canada as in the past and apply for a US visa. So that avenue will also not be available to Indians. So I think, as I agree with Mr. Moitra, that this is the new normal, and we have to adjust to this in the best way possible. And this issue about renewal, because the new H-1B visas are only 85,000, of which, even if we accept that 50% were going to the Indians, there are 2 million people with H-1B visas in the US, for 3 years, and then it gets extended for another 3 years. Now, if $100,000 is expected to be paid by each person applicant for an extension of his H-1B, I think most people will not be able to spare that kind of money. And the companies, mind you, if I have read it correctly, they have to pay a lot more for sponsoring the H-1B applicants for extension. So, it is going to the numbers of H-1B visa holders in the US, I perceive will come down very steadily, and if I may put it quite sharply, over the next few months, because visas keep coming up for renewal every month or so. So on the whole, I think the prospects don't seem to be very appealing or optimistic or bright, and we will have to live with it. uh, the last point I wanted to mention is that this is going to definitely have an impact on US visa applications for students, because apart from the top notch universities, the tier 2 and tier 3 university to which a lot of Indians were also getting enrolled, I think that will that will sort of taper off, because the possibility of getting a job after getting a first degree in the US, that is considerably darker now. So that will also affect the functioning of the universities, because many of them, they depend to a great extent on foreign student tuition fees for their survival. So this is something which we have also seen in other countries like the UK, where the number of admissions of Indian students is coming down quite sharply.
Yeah, after US, after the UK, now US, Mithali, which means that there has to be a complete realignment in the way the youth of India, the youngsters in India are, the kind of aspirations that they have. They cannot, I mean, immigration, Dr. Sheena Sridhar has been talking about, it's coming out of the need to have a better lifestyle. It is not just about money and et cetera, et cetera. But even that case, with the way visa regimes have been and with the way costs, or what costs are, Indian students, the young people watching this broadcast, young working professionals, all of them will have to change their entire template of aspirations in terms of what they want out of their lives and their careers.
No, absolutely, Krishna. I mean, honestly, there are impacts even for the US economy that we have not fully analyzed. At the end of the day, there are full towns in the US. Like, for example, I'd gone to Amherst recently for a conference, and the entire town of Amherst depends on the students to run the local economy. So this is going to have local economic implications even for the US economy. And it's the money flowing in from investors, from students, from even foreign funders into the US, which makes the US such a thriving economy. Why is it that so much of the work around digital services, around automation, around AI development is happening in these clusters which are housed in the US? There is a need now to rethink the location of these clusters. And in fact, I've met, some of the scientists from MIT when I was in Boston, who professed that actually their research is no longer the most advanced in the world. And there are several Chinese universities that have taken over, and they are now the global leaders when it comes to several areas of STEM. So I do think that, this is almost again, like we have been saying since April, another self goal which is being made by the president of the US in terms of kicking out some of the best talent. Of course, we are zooming in a little bit on the Indian IT sector, or, the Indian professionals, because they make up such a big chunk of it. But there are also other global scientists and, researchers who are coming to the US on this H-1B visa, who are all going to be removed. Where are they going to go? They will go in the rest of the world, to Europe, to China, to other countries where their research is valued. And suddenly we'll find that there's a dispersion of research away from the US. And Indians will, of course, India also has a great opportunity now to say, look, we have a liberalized policy to bring foreign universities to India. This is the best time to bring foreign universities to India, to bring those workers who have, not got their job on their H-1B anymore. They have the talent, they have the skills, come back, help to rebuild the country. And also, I completely agree with Sridharan when we're talking about the urban livability, this is the one thing. If there is one clear clarion call around which we need to organize all of our urban local bodies, our National Institute of Urban Affairs and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, it is around just let us clean up our cities. Our talent is going to come back. They need a house. We have a really good policy on education where we can bring foreign universities here. We have now investors ready from across the world to come and invest in research and development in India. We have, the talent, the workforce, the infrastructure. If our livability can be solved for, we can also become a global giant when it comes to
Right.
research and innovation in STEM and in tech.
Okay, okay. Shripal Jain, at this stage, for all the young people watching us again on this broadcast, they need to ensure that their destinations, the choice and preference of destinations change, because it cannot be the same old UK and the US again.
Oh, 100%. I think I completely agree with our fellow panelists that India has to grow. And if India has to grow, the talent need to focus that we also have a huge potential here. I don't think so. The world is ended for all the young professionals. And it's not just engineering, right? We are seeing a lot of accounting shortages also in the US. Almost 300K people have either been resigned or they have retired. So much of accounting shortages are also happening in the US. So a lot of these US based companies are opening their shops here in India. And we have already got a policy of a national policy on global capability center, which is GCC. So these talent can also contribute to the accounting and finance field as well. And India is obviously we are calculating a 1.5 to 2% GDP in next 10 to 12 years under the GCC scheme, which the government is highly kind of talking about. So I think that is also one of the good avenues for the people and the young people who are just telling that only engineering is the only field. I think accounting is also equally a great field, or I would say finance. I think that's where also they can build their future on, because there is a huge shortages there as well. So US definitely have a lot of talent shortages across all the areas. But I think finance is something also which we can relook at. And second, coming to one of the panelists talking about Canada as an option, which I have given, I think why I was talking about is if they can apply for a Canadian PR or could become a Canadian citizen, they can work in the US without any visa. And that's why I was telling that a lot of the Indian students might take the Canadian route or do a workaround on that and then come to the US ultimately. So that were one of the two options which I probably think that Indian talent who are currently in the US might want to take up, and one who are planning to go to the US or something like that. I think the GCC is one of the emerging space and is contributing a huge amount to our economy. So students should definitely look beyond engineering also and look towards accounting and
Right.
finance field also.
Right. We need to look at more options. That's the big headline coming out of this. It cannot be the way it was before, because things have changed one way or the other. I'm going to thank everybody from Shripal Jain, Mitali Nikore, Barney Chitran Moitro, Dr. Srinath Sridharan, and Dr. Jayan Dasgupta. Thank you, all of you, for taking time out to be with us here on News9 today for this big story that we're tracking. Uncertainties lie ahead. It's all about how India navigates them going forward. The bombshell from the US, Donald Trump, the US president's decision to raise the fees on H-1B visas to $100,000, which will hit Indians the hardest, because 70% of those H-1B visas that the US hands out belongs to Indians. This move was likely to hit the US tech industry hard as well, bear in mind, because they heavily rely on foreign workers, mostly from India and China. The Indian workers make up the majority of beneficiaries for H-1B visas, accounting for 70%. And recently, and rightly so, Amitabh Kant, former Niti Aayog, put it, Trump's proposal would stifle American innovation while boosting India's talent-driven growth. Announcing the H-1B visa fee hike, US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said that companies will now be required to pay $100,000 annually for every single visa.
will use for cutting taxes and paying down debt. We think it's going to be very successful. Essentially, we're having people come in, people that in many cases, I guess, are very successful or whatever, and they're coming in, they're going to spend a lot of money to come in, they're going to pay as opposed to walking over the borders, and they may come from jails, prisons, and everything else. These people don't. They're very productive people. And they're going to pay $1 million. The corporation's going to pay $2 million. And it's going to raise billions of dollars, billions and billions of dollars, which is going to go to reduce taxes, pay off debt, and other good things.
Meanwhile, Microsoft has already advised its H-1B and H-4 visa employees to return to the US immediately ahead of the September 21st deadline. It has also advised its H-1B visa employees that are currently already in the US to continue working in the country for the foreseeable future. Companies like Meta and Amazon have also advised the H-1B visa holder employees to return back to the US within 24 hours. And amidst all the uncertainty, New Jersey's governor, the state of New Jersey's governor, Phil Murphy, is in India on a 6-day, 4-city economic mission. And he struck an optimistic note on visas, saying that new regimes often overcorrect before stabilizing, and expressed hope that the student visa process will be streamlined soon. Now, the US president has also unveiled 2 new investor visa schemes named the Trump Gold Card and the Trump Platinum Card visas, priced from $1 million to $5 million. And the program aims to attract top-tier talent and high net worth individuals to the United States of America. The Trump Gold Card comes with exclusive privileges for both individuals and businesses, while the Gold Card includes a potential pathway to citizenship. The Platinum Card will allow foreigners to spend up to 270 days in the US without paying taxes on overseas income. Now,
I will be shocked if there's not a deal of some sort, and I would bet sooner than later. The vibrations, the phone calls, the social media, the deputy trade person who was here earlier this week, I just have to believe something will come together here. By the way, we're not standing still. Well, I may not be a tariff guy. We decided a few months ago that we would put in place the largest incentive for onshoring manufacturing of any American state. That's a specific step we're taking, assuming that we're in some kind of a higher tariff reality.
And now, to understand what it means for India, what can happen in the near future, and more, we have Dr. Jayant Dasgupta, former Indian ambassador to the WTO, now joining us on the broadcast. We have Dr. Srinath Sridharan, policy researcher and corporate advisor, now joining us. And we also have Mr. Barnik Chitran Moitro, private equity investor and managing partner, Chrysalis Equity Ventures, joining us over here. Thank you, all of you, for taking time out to be with us for this big story that we're talking. Dr. Jayant Dasgupta begins with a very simple question. Everything from a tariff hike to a visa fee hike, all of it will put a strain on India-US ties. But the question here is that are you at this stage seeing that there could be a possible reversal soon, like the New Jersey governor was talking about?
I don't think really that President Trump will, of his own, withdraw this order, which he has issued and which will become effective from the 1st of October, because that is when the applications for the visas, H-1B visas, are invited. And within 3-4 days, once it reaches 4 times the quota or about 5 times the quota, the process is stopped. The windows are shut, and then there is a lottery. And the results come out by the end of March, early April. And from the 1st of April, the visa year starts. So I don't think that between now, which is the 20th of September, and the 30th of September, President Trump is going to withdraw this, which he must have been considering for quite some time, because there were press items about this being contemplated. So that is one thing. The other point is that this is likely to get challenged in courts of law. And there would be considerable pressure from the companies which have been inviting H-1B visa holders to come in and work for them. The largest amongst them being Amazon. Then Microsoft, of course, TCS has an offshore base in the US, so it is also a large beneficiary. And then Apple, Google, everybody, the big tech companies, they all rely a lot on H-1B visa holders to come and take up jobs with them. So I think there will be a backlash, but it may take a few months before it settles down and the order is modified in some way.
Okay, Dr. Sridharan, the visa fee at this stage is more than the annual income of many H-1B visa fee holders.
See, that's true, Krishna, but you have to look at it from the business balance sheet perspective. If the companies are going to send talent from India or China to the US, it's their productivity output is far greater than the salary that is being paid. And it is also an arbitrage. In a lot of cases, it's also a cost arbitrage vis-a-vis homegrown talent and with all the privileges and perks that are being provided. So from that perspective, I don't think it will be a large implication for businesses. Even for the Indian ITS company, the implications, as I see it, will be very, very short-term implication. The large companies will find probably a couple of basis point of margins that might come under pressure, but it will be the middle and the smaller companies which will have a large impact. For the global big tech companies, I don't think it will change the wheels really, so to speak. But again, I want to just step back and say, well, we're all jumping and making politicking about economics. But let's face it, the American growth over the last entire century has come from immigration. The reality is across its sectors, not just Indians, the growth of all expertise has come from immigrations and their policies. So from that perspective, I think they're looking at it far differently. And how is it so different from our supposed or perceived outrage of saying that, hey, we will have reverse brain drain? If we had the wherewithal to pay for talent and treated them well in India, don't our people be staying back? That's something that our policymakers also have to think. We have cities which are unlivable, which, unless we can bring dignity back to living in India, in a lot of sense, and pay for IP, intellectual property, I don't think this politicizing other countries' conversation would really make any difference.
Barney Chitram Moitro, the reason why this gets so much of thought and understanding here in India is because at the end of the day, 70% of those visas or by the US for H-1B category are availed of by Indians. It's a massive number. There has been a history with our, with the way H-1B visas. Remember the time in the late 1990s, prior to Y2K, when the visa demand just shot up majorly and then went bust by the time the 2000s, 2004 came about, and then there was a rise all over again. And this discussion about raising the visa fees has been on for a while. This was there when the first time he came to power as well. And since he's come back to power, there has always been this talk which has finally resulted in this $100,000 fee.
Yeah, so let's just go back to the history of this regulation, right? This is not a one-off regulation which has come.
Yeah.
If you look at in December, a month before the president took office, there was a big debate in the MAGA base about H-1Bs and a discussion on Indians in general. At that point of time, two of his Doge founders, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, actually came out publicly in support of the H-1B program, saying that it provided tech workers to the US. And at that time, this was a month before the president took office, he actually supported them. Since then, both gentlemen are out of favor and out of power. I think the noise in the MAGA base about Indians in the US has particularly risen. So we have to view this policy announcement as a very precise surgical strike on Indian technology talent directed towards the big tech companies hiring Indians, and the collateral damage being the outsourcing firms like TCS, Infosys, right? If you read the proclamation carefully, and I just read it today morning, they actually cite examples of 4 technology companies who have laid off thousands of American workers while continuing to file for H-1B petitions. Again, one can guess that these are some of the largest names like Microsoft and Amazon and Apple maybe. He has also talked very precisely about the fact that the share of technology workers in the H-1B program has gone from 30% in 2003 to over 65-70% in 2025. and that more than 70% of those visas actually go to India. If you look at the visa processing statistics for last year, nearly 400,000 H-1Bs were processed, which are a combination of fresh issues and renewals, and the share of Indians in that was 70%. So make no mistake, this is not a whimsical policy decision. This has been brewing for some time, and with this, the president is actually addressing his core constituency. So I would not just believe that this will disappear overnight. This is likely to get challenged in court, as some of the other panelists pointed out, because the language of the proclamation is easily muddled. There is no clear justification given which ensures that he has the emergency powers to do this without an act of Congress. So this is likely to go to the courts. But as we've seen with the Supreme Court siding with the administration 100% of the time, I don't expect there to be substantive judicial relief, at least till this administration is on. So I think I empathize with the probably 2 or 3 million Indians, right, who are stuck in the H-1B queue, right, who have to renew their visas every 3 years, right, who now will be advised and has been advised by Microsoft and other companies to not leave the country for the foreseeable future. It creates a lot of uncertainty. And let's be clear that from an Indian point of view, how foreign governments treat our workers and treat our citizens is an important pillar of foreign policy. I see this being a major irritant in any future trade deal if this continues. So while in the long term, this will hurt the US far more than it will hurt India. But again, let's spare a thought for the people who are actually stuck in limbo for no fault of their own, and the uncertainty this will cause to millions of Indian families who've spent years, if not decades, in the US serving American companies and Indian outsourcing providers. So we should not take this announcement lightly. I think this will cause severe stress and displacement in that community.
Right. We will have to understand how much of an impact it's going to have eventually, to all stakeholders concerned. The big questions that are facing, one is, of course, how much of an impact will this higher H-1B visa fees hit Indian IT companies' revenues, the tech revenues of India? That's a big question. Impact on IT exports. There is, of course, the question of the impact on Indian workers and the financial burden on them. How will the higher H-1B visa fee mean, what it will mean for their work opportunities? Will they start looking at opportunities elsewhere? Will talent move to Canada or Australia or in Europe and stop looking at US as one of the major reason to emigrate, the destination? Those are the big questions facing facing us, facing Indians and Indian companies, and more importantly, the US as well, because bear in mind, how much will it impact, their tech innovation is another question that's facing us at this point in time. Let me take this back to Ambassador Jayant Dasgupta. Ambassador Jayant Dasgupta, there's a trade deal that everybody has been expecting and that everybody has been hoping for, that there is we don't seem to have Jayant Dasgupta over here. Barnik, I'm going to come back to you. There is Srinath Sridharan, I'm going to come back to you. There is a trade deal that we're hoping for. Can a negotiation on the H-1B visa fee hike take place alongside a trade deal?
Krishna, the reality is it will be one of the agenda. You'll have to trade off, and how much can we push back and how much will we trade off? I think, we can only wish we are the so-called fly on the wall, so to speak. We will never know. I think all parties concerned will either be very diplomatic when they put out proclamations on Twitter or official statements, or you're going to have side gossips that is going to come into the media to be fed back to the narrative. But if you look at it, the reality is all these are irritants. And the only reason why I think I slightly don't think it is only, as somebody had put it on Twitter, saying that it's a weaponization against India. It's not so. India is only 70% of the visa holders. But the reality is it's also going to hurt the US in the short term. But there is a messaging out in the long term that some of these talent is not available in the US at all. So he is doing it for his domestic politics, couple elections coming up, and in the local constituents. The reality is our trade conversations are going to be far more tougher. We have had one end for agriculture and dairy and fisheries on one end, and while you can always adjust the tariffs and customs on the other side, the other one that which I hope the Indian government will stand up and realize is the one which is worrying me about digital sovereignty. Including all the Indian ministries use operating software which are the Western big tech, the American big tech. Social media is American big tech. We are not like the China where we have a kind of banned their entry and built our own. So how are we going to stand up to them, and what is it that we're going to give in? And we would want to continue being a non-aligned nation, which means our relationship with Russia will continue. We are not going to give it up. So none of this will become binary. I think that's where I think a lot of these will depend. And I think what we have seen is the personal rapport, the Twitter bromance aside, I think will be truly tested here at some point in time. Will they speak to each other and say, hey, I'm not going to give in because it's going to hurt the country? Tough one, Krishna. I think really tough to have this negotiation. I won't be even surprised that if it gets extended beyond the current time, because some of these conversations are deal breakers by themselves.
Barnik, the other question that's facing us at this stage is, how will, Indian workers, talking about 70% of H-1B visa holders, it is a cultural thing in India, and after a point, it's a subculture to get that, to go on an H-1B visa, make your life in the US. So it has a societal impact apart from a financial one.
No, I think it's got a very broad societal impact. If you look at some of the fallouts of what's going to happen, I suspect that Indian applications to American universities will be at a record low for the next academic year, right? If you look at in general, forget about India, I think you brought the point of Canada, Europe. I think the pro-nationalist movement and the entire anti-immigrant sentiment is not limited only to the boundaries of the US. It is generally a wave in the Western economies, right? So if you're today sitting in India and looking at making long-term futures, whether it's in the US or beyond, there are several dark clouds on the horizon, and some of them as immediate as today. So I think culturally there will be a shift. I think if you look at